Welcome everybody to Fantasy Football Today Express. Let's look at running our players 13 through 24 in Dave's PPR rankings right now. All right, Dave, we start with a couple of running backs, Genty and Derrick Henry. You know, a lot of people are going to go, why not Derrick Henry? We just talked a lot about Genty, so you can give your quick thoughts on that. But if you listen to the full show, you heard Dave say he's comfortable with Genty at the 1-2 turn. But yeah, people in the comments on YouTube on Monday's show, on the full FFT episode, we're calling out, hey, why not Derrick Henry? He was RB3 per game last year. So he averaged as many points per game as Bijan Robinson, even in full PPR. Why did Genty and Henry not make your top 12?
They're right behind him, or he's right behind them, I guess I should say. And the people who are wondering why isn't Derrick Henry a first-round pick, they might be right. I'm kind of hedging a little bit against Henry. He's 31 years old. We've had this story and this conversation before. Can he do what he did last year? Can he replicate it to the level of being almost 20 PPR points per game? Or could he regress to 14.8? That's where he was at in 2023. And I get it. Completely different situation. He had 14.8 in Tennessee. Tennessee sucked. Baltimore was awesome last year. They might be even better this year. 19.8 seems like he'll be closer to that than he would be to 14.8. But he's got to make it through the whole year again. He's got to have everything perfect again. He had 367 carries, both over the regular season and the playoffs combined. I'm comfortable with him as a top 15 pick. I don't want to wedge him that much higher if I can help it. I see McCaffrey. I see Genty. I see Devon Achane. I feel like they're all in that same group, but I kind of feel more comfortable with those other runners.
Brian Thomas and A.J. Brown are next at 15 and 16. And then we get Kyren Williams and Josh Jacobs at 17 and 18. So the first 6 players for you are Genty, Henry, Brian Thomas Jr., A.J. Brown, Kyren Williams, Josh Jacobs. At what point do you think we are running out of elite players or done with the elite players? Or maybe have we not reached that point?
I would say that where I've got A.J. Brown is where it ends. And you could even make the argument that it ends with Derrick Henry at 14. Another point on Derrick Henry in full PPR, he doesn't catch many passes. So you lose out on all those points. Brian Thomas Jr. and A.J. Brown, yeah, they catch plenty of passes. Thomas Jr., 7.8 targets per game last year. That number, even with Travis Hunter going to Jacksonville, could go up. A.J. Brown, 7.5 targets per game. Hey, if something happens to Saquon Barkley, he's not as effective or he misses time, that number could go up. I think those are excellent round 2 wide receivers to target, and they're perfect to get no matter what you do in round 1. If you want to have one of each of running back and wide receiver, those can be your wide receivers. If you want to go 0 RB to at least start your draft, I kind of like that plan if you're picking in the middle of round 1 and you hope that one of those 2 guys makes it to you in round 2. I like those guys. They're talented. In the case of A.J. Brown, he's been really good for fantasy, at least 16.7 PPR points per game each of the last 3 years, with pockets of huge numbers coming in some of those seasons. I'm a big fan of those guys. I think this is easy stuff. They're all top 20 and bordering on top 15.
Okay, so then we'll talk about the guys after Genty, Henry, Thomas, and A.J. Brown. And we'll do that after this break on FFT Express. So we're up to 17 in your consensus rankings. Kyren Williams, Josh Jacobs, Chase Brown at 19, Bucky Irving 20, Jonathan Taylor 21. That is 5 straight running backs from 16 to 21, or 17 to 21, pardon me. Drake London 22, Ladd McConkey 23, T. Higgins 24. And then you, by the way, just outside the top 24 are the 2 tight ends, McBride and Bowers. But once you get past A.J. Brown at 16, do you feel strongly about the order of the next 5 to 10 picks, or do you think it really could go any way?
I think it could go any way, and I wouldn't blame you if you went Jacobs over Kyren Williams. We've really gotten some great stuff out of Kyren Williams the last 2 years, but there just seems to be a little uneasiness about how tight of a grip he's got on that job in LA. And it might have to do with the tightness of his grip on the football. He's got a fumbling issue. It cost the Rams in their playoff loss against Philadelphia. If he fumbles again to start the year, we see one of Blake Corum or Jarquez Hunter start to eat into those carries? Is it possible that the addition of Devontae Adams hurts Kyron Williams' touchdown production because Devontae Adams figures to be a big red zone threat for the Rams. So I don't think Jacobs has necessarily those same kinds of issues. I think Jacobs' issues are much more about, well, is he going to face a lot more 8 in the box? Could he get hurt? Stuff like that we've kind of seen with Jacobs before. And we say, okay, he can't do what he did last year again, can he? And so because these are players that have, we can pick at them a little bit more. That's why they're not in the elite tier. That's why they're in the next tier up. They still have the upside to do what they did last year. It's about 17 PPR points per game. Could they get higher than that? I don't think so. Could they get lower than that? Absolutely. And that's why they're in this spot in round 2. And you've got to be comfortable with whoever you pick in that range. At least with Jacobs and Kyron Williams, we've seen a couple of seasons from them. Jacobs more than a couple of them putting up some solid numbers for fantasy managers. With Chase Brown and Bucky Irving, you're taking a little bit of a risk because these guys had partial years where they were outstanding. Can they keep it up? That's always a big question.
And if we think there are 16 players in that, elite tier, 14 to 16 players, and then it's pretty jumbled, where you could say, all right, look at who you have 30th. You have Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels 30th. You have JSN and Tyreek Hill after that. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is maybe we want to have a pick 7th or later in the draft because you get 2 of the top 16.
Sure.
Unless I'm doing my math wrong. I think I'm doing my math wrong. Well, 9th or later, right? So that would be 12. 9th or later.
9th or later.
You get 2 of the top 16. And then the guy you get in the 3rd round might not be that much worse than the guy who went 10 picks earlier, who the guy, the manager who had the 3rd overall pick took in the 2nd round. Right. So
sure.
Just food for thought. But to talk more about the players in this tier, or in this group for you in your rankings, 13 through 24, you talked about Kyron and Jacobs. Then you have Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, those 3 running backs. Brown, Bucky, Taylor versus 3 receivers, London, McConkey, Higgins. Does anything really separate them?
With Brown, we saw last year that he averaged 21.1 touches per game in week 6 through 17, played a lot of snaps, especially from week 9 on, averaged 18 PPR points per game. Yeah, I know the Cincinnati Bengals brought back Samaje Perine and Zach Moss is still there. Are those guys enough to really take Chase Brown off the field and turn him into a guy that's only going to play 50, 55% of the snaps? I don't think so. So he's I like the potential for him, especially on a team that doesn't have a good defense, is going to put up a lot of points. Yeah, they throw the ball a lot. Chase Brown can catch passes too. I'm okay with Chase Brown in this range. I think I'd rather have an established running back and certainly an established receiver ahead of Chase Brown, but he's right there. Bucky's right behind him. He had great numbers from week 6 on, 16.9 PPR points per game. And there were only 3 games last year, if you include the playoffs, where he played more than 60% of the snaps. You can make the case that the Bucs are going to unleash Bucky Irving and give him 70% of the snaps week in and week out, but they're also pretty deep at running back in Tampa. It's not like Cincinnati. We could see Tampa Bay use more of Rachaad White in pass down situations. We've seen it for the past couple of years. Sean Tucker is a good back. Maybe he gets in there, not for many carries. It could be like 3 or 4 carries per game. But that's also a team that addressed their receiving core, and they like to throw. And that makes me a little bit more nervous about Bucky than it does Chase Brown. But both of them worth taking the chance on in round 2, even though they don't have that great track record. Now, Jonathan,
just to finish it up, though, is there anything that separates those 3 running backs from the 3 receivers after them? So Brown, Bucky, Taylor versus London, McConkey, Higgins.
Yeah. So Drake London averaged 15 PPR points per game if you take out week 18. Week 18 was a massive game. It greatly affected his numbers. That was with Penix. It was without Darnell Mooney. It was a blowout. I don't want to count that game. And Drake London, to me, I think he's on a very different tier than A.J. Brown and Brian Thomas Jr., and definitely different than a lot of those other running backs. And I've got some concerns about Ladd McConkey repeating what he did last year. and T. Higgins repeating what he did last year in a contract year. I worry about those guys. I'm going to lean toward the running backs, including Brown, Irving, and Jonathan Taylor. Taylor, much more touchdown reliant, doesn't get a lot of catches. I obviously have questions about how that Colts offense is going to look, but I don't have questions about who's going to get the ball on the ground. That's going to be Jonathan Taylor running the rock.
But as we said, if you're in a draft and someone takes T. Higgins before Chase Brown, which I think ADP probably has, or takes Drake London ahead of Bucky Irving, it's fine. It's fine. It's a big tier of very good players.
It's safer. It's safer at wide receiver. I'll give them that.
I think London is probably the safest of that group of 6. Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, Drake London, McConkey, Higgins.
Sure. I agree.
Who's the second safest? I'd say Higgins.
I don't know.
I'd say Taylor.
I think Taylor might be the second safest.
Although I think Taylor's only the second safest if Daniel Jones is his quarterback. Because I know he had very good production with Richardson, but he had fewer than 1 catch per game, and he had only half the goal line carries. So you could see downside with.
Of course. And like, he was ridiculous in his last 3 games. We can't say what we said about London and not apply it to Jonathan Taylor. He averaged over 30 fantasy points per game in his final 3, 2 of them with Flacco. That greatly helped his average. He was probably closer to 14 or 15 PPR points per game before that.
And he averaged 32 carries per game in those 3. And that's not going to happen throughout the course of a season. Okay, my friend. Thank you very much for your time. That's Dave Richard. I'm Adam Azer. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today Express.